Good morning. Welcome to LWVCO's annual legislative conference. We're pleased you're here. Today, we'll spend a few hours together learning from a diversity of speakers about some of the League of Women Voters of Colorado's priorities this legislative session, as well as some of LWV of the United States' plans. You'll meet some partners, hear from the League's leadership, and hopefully be inspired to continue the fight for American democracy. Today, January 25th, is the 154th birthday of the League of Women Voters' first president, Maud Wood Park. It was Maud who directed lobbying efforts that contributed to the passage of the Shepard-Towner Act of 1921, which authorized federal aid to states for maternity, child health, and welfare programs. The Cable Act of 1922, which granted married women U.S. citizenship independent of their husband's status, and the Child Labor Amendment submitted to the states in 1924. So let's all raise our coffee cups to toast this original leader of our movement. Happy birthday, Maud. The League's 105th birthday is coming up next month, and LWVCO will be hosting a celebration February 20th at the Molly Brown House Museum. We hope to see some of you there. Now let's get started. First up is vacancy committee reform, an important topic, considering that that's how 1/3 of our current legislators made it into the General Assembly without a vote of the constituency they'll serve. We're honored to have Senator Lindsey Daugherty and Rep. Bob Marshall discuss their reform ideas with us. First up alphabetically is Senator Daugherty. Lindsey Daugherty is serving as a member of the Colorado Senate from the 19th District. First elected in 2020, she assumed office on January 13th, 2021. Daugherty graduated from Thompson Valley High School in Loveland, Colorado. She earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science from the University of Northern Iowa and a Juris Doctor from the Sturm College of Law at the University of Denver. For over 8 years, she served as a guardian ad litem, advocating for children in difficult family law cases, which led her to run for the State House in the hopes of impacting systemic change. Since then, she's been an advocate for reproductive rights, children's rights, and expanding access to affordable health care. She and her husband are the proud parents of a darling toddler named Theo. Senator Daugherty.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to try and share my screen here. And I'll get this slideshow up and running. I think that it's really important when we're talking about reform for anything to know the background of why we are reforming and what other states have done and what we have done traditionally. So I'm going to try to go quickly because I know we don't have too much time. I don't want to take all of the time. But if we're looking at state by states and making sure we know what a vacancy is, vacancies, oops, sorry. Here we go. Vacancies are when an elected official resigns, passes, and leaves office for any reason by the end of their term. So we actually had 2 folks this just happened to, and one caused a vacancy in the House as well because it was a Senate seat. We are getting a lot of folks, as you heard in the intro, into the legislature by vacancies. And I think what's important to note is that every state develops their own method that is stated through law or provisions within their state constitution. And so I will go on. So how are vacancy seats filled? There are 4 overarching ways to fill a vacancy: through a special election, an appointment by a board of county commissioners, an appointment by the governor, and an appointment by the political party. One outlier is Ohio, and their appointment is through members of the same house and the party as the last incumbent. Of the 4 main ways, there are variations that we can look at. So special election. This is the most widely used method. 25 states use a special election to fill a vacancy. One example, Arkansas, includes the variation that state party committees may choose to hold a special primary election or a convention of party delegates to choose nominees. The governor also has the discretion to determine whether special elections fill certain vacancies are impractical due to the timing of the vacancy. Overall, I would say when we're looking at state by states in a comparison, this is the most widely preferred method. Plus half of our country utilizes this. And I think that it's because it allows citizens to have the most amount of input and the most voices into who their representatives are. There are 8 seats total that fill a vacant seat by an appointment through a board of county commissioners. One example of a state is Nevada, where the county commissioners appoint a person of the same political party as the incumbent. However, this only applies when there isn't already an upcoming election for county officers or a regular election before the next legislative session. And then also, obviously, governor appointing. There are 11 states that fill a vacancy through this process. I think there are pros and cons to this. A couple of pros include timely representation. You can bypass processes that can be long or difficult. You can maintain legislative continuity and as well as political stability. I think on the other hand, there are a few concerns. An appointment bypasses the electoral process and denies the opportunity to vote for a representative. Also, there can be transparency issues in this process. And then there's also political party appointments. 5 states do this. So I think this is important to know. Only 5 states do what Colorado is doing currently. Colorado is one of these 5 states through a political party appointment known as a vacancy committee. And obviously, I think there are a lot of pros and cons, and I think obviously a lot of cons being thrown out there in the news, especially because of how many people we're getting through the vacancy process right now. So as I said, we're one of 5 states. We think it's undemocratic because the people aren't getting to vote on their representation. And 1 in 5 members are from a vacancy committee at this point, which is quite a lot. And it seems like it's continuing to grow. So a few other states, because I think it's interesting how other states do it. Arizona, Washington, and Wyoming utilize a board of county commissioners to fill the seat, but they're provided a slate of options by a citizens panel. Montana also has a board of county commissioners appoint the replacement. However, if there's enough time, the replacement is required to be elected, which is 85 days or more. And Tennessee, if there's a time of 1 year or more given, then the replacement is also elected, not appointed by a board of commissioners. I think I'll just quickly get to our legislation that we're kind of talking about, which is basically a hybrid system. Let me exit here. I'll stop the screen share real quick. So what we are looking at, and like I said, I've done a deep dive into other states and systems so that we could try to find something in Colorado that works for everyone, where we have, when there's a vacancy, where we have someone to fill the vacancy so folks aren't unrepresented for a session, and that's timely and increases participation in the political process. So where we are in the process is the legislation that we are going to propose does have a special election proponent of it. There is also a hybrid system to fill in cases, in the circumstances where there wouldn't be a legislator for a session because there is no election until November. The point of us keeping the elections in November is to lower cost, and there should be a ballot going out every November, which decreases cost and it's less work for the clerks. I don't want to go into any more details than that because we still don't have it on bill paper. And what we are trying to do right now is get the policy right and work out all of the minor details. And there are a lot of details. The devil's always in the details with legislation. But I will say it's a hybrid system looking at special elections in order to minimize costs but maximize participation. And I could spend like hours on this topic because I've been, like I said, doing a deep dive, but that was as quick as I could do it so that I wasn't taking up all the time. And so with that, I would love to hear comments or reach out. And when we have a draft on paper, I don't want to be disrespectful to the process and making sure that folks hear it when we get it on paper, because that's when we've been telling people we would share. But stay tuned. we're working it out, and I'm really excited about the path that we're going and where we're leaning, and would love your input. And we'll certainly share absolutely when we've got that out and can share. So with that, thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Daugherty. We appreciate it. Now let's hear from Representative Bob Marshall, who is also working on vacancy committees. Representative Marshall was born and raised in Colorado before leaving the state to attend Georgetown University on full scholarship. He then joined the Marine Corps and served 6 years on active duty before being selected for the law education program and sent to Cornell Law School, where he graduated magna cum laude with 2 degrees, a Juris Doctor and a Master of Laws. He then served at the Marine Corps Air Station Iwakuni, Japan, as the Senior Defense Counsel and then the Station Judge Advocate. He returned to Colorado in 2004 and worked as a lawyer before being called back to the Marines to serve in both Iraq and Afghanistan. His military law service then led him to San Diego for 6 years before taking a job with the IRS. Bob was a proud Republican for 30 years before leaving the party in late 2017 after verbal attacks by President Trump against Gold Star families. 4 years later, he registered as a Democrat and was elected as House Representative for District 43 in 2022. He was reelected last year. Bob's been married for 30 years and has a daughter who's continuing the multi-generational family tradition of military service as a nuclear submarine officer. Representative Marshall, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. So it's great that Senator Daugherty gave such an extensive history on it, because the history can be important. We have had this system in Colorado since 1951, and it was never a problem for the first half century. If it was just 4 to 6 people in the legislature serving as getting in there as vacancy appointments, no one would bat an eye, no one did bat an eye. So research I did, which was confirmed by independent research by somebody else, it has become an unintended consequence of term limits that were imposed in the 90s. So over the last 20 years, it's been growing and growing and growing, the number of vacancy appointments. So now Colorado has, by a large margin, the most vacancy appointees serving in the legislature. And the reason the term limits has caused this explosion is every legislator now has a hard date. They must leave the legislature. So that has exponentially increased the incentive to manipulate the system as you go out. So as an example, just 2 weeks ago, we had almost 10% of Colorado Senate, 3 state senators were elected by these small vacancy committees, a total of about 250 people, 100 in Denver, 100 in Douglas County, and 45 to 50 in Aurora, selected the 3 people that will represent 500,000 citizens in Colorado. And these are not even just random selections, these vacancy committees of citizens and voters. They are the most active party activists, which on either side are usually the most partisan and extreme members making these decisions on who to put in. And so last session, we had 29 of 100 members received as a vacancy appointment. Now, the biggest problem I see from this, and the reason it's become such a problem, it's the power of the incumbency. So there's been a lot of floating different ideas out there, but anything that does not go to that issue is going to fail if we keep this vacancy process in place. And there are good reasons to have this vacancy process. And as a backup, the 5 states that do this now, only North Dakota has term limits. But they're also not a very good comparator because they only meet once every other year for 80 days. Colorado, since we meet 120 days every year, special elections can be a problem for multiple reasons. One, they're expensive, but half the states do it. So that's not really a bad, a really good reason to say no to special elections. But also, if you do special elections and they're on off years or off cycle or off times, you'll get very low turnout and you'll get a weird result if you have a very low turnout who's probably not very representative of the district. And then 3, because of our 120-day session, it takes about 80 to 100 120 days to run a decent special election. So there is a very high possibility there'll be overlap with the special session, and a district will lose representation in the only time that really matters, which is that 120 days during the year. So what I've been proposing, and I proposed it last year, is a ballot measure, which is a big plus in my mind because the voters decide, not a bunch of people in a dark room that decide what we will be allowed to do, but let the voters decide what they want to do. That if you get your position by a vacancy appointment, if you're appointed into that position, you are a true interim appointee and you serve out that term, but you are not allowed to run in that very next general election. You could run for another office, you could run for not that same office later, but you would finish out that term. That keeps the expectations of all the candidates and all the voters that there'll be an open general election and not these perpetual incumbents in the seat. Just as an example, these last 2 weeks, of those 3 state senators, 2 had been appointed into the Senate themselves, and now they are being replaced by appointees. So it's already becoming a self-perpetuating system of locking out the voters. And we have a lot of people say, well, they run in the next general election and then the people choose them. Well, because of the power of incumbency, what they are doing is they're just allowing the voters to ratify the decision these insiders had already made. So again, going after the incumbency issue is key, because if we still allow the insiders to place the person into the inside seat, it is not going to address the issue long term. Last year, really, the only 3 people I know who were interested in even addressing this issue was myself, Rep. Soper, and Rep. Garcia, and we could never agree on what to do. That's one of the biggest problems we've had on addressing this issue, is everybody has their own ideas of what should be done. So I finally put this forward at the last second I possibly could, by right, without having to ask permission. And it shocked everyone. It got out of State Affairs 7-4, 4 Republicans and 3 Democrats voting for it. And 2 of the 4 Democrats who voted against it were vacancy appointees. Was not going to get off the floor, so we didn't push it. But this year, when Senator Hansen resigned, and right after getting reelected, announced he was resigning, Rep. Soper and Rep. Garcia contacted me and said, Bob, you are absolutely right. This is the only way to go. And they're both co-sponsors on the reform I'm proposing. Unfortunately, the powers that be don't want to see this reform, so I don't think it'll get out either, and probably won't go anywhere this time either. People have been passing that it's unconstitutional, and I just have to say, anybody who is saying that is either not, I would doubt their integrity or their competence. I already got an OLS opinion on it, and it's just a term limit that the voters put in the Constitution for 1 office, for 1 term, for 1 person. So if state term limits are not unconstitutional, that very, very narrow one, it would be very difficult to believe any court would consider it an unconstitutional restriction under the federal Constitution. So that's where I'm at.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Representative Marshall. We do have a couple questions in the chat. Number 1, I don't believe that bill has a number yet. Is that correct, Representative Marshall?
No, it hasn't been introduced, and it's actually a resolution because it has to go to the voters. So I can hold off by right for a little bit longer. But yeah, I've been hearing there's 3 or 4 other things floating around. I've been putting mine out publicly everywhere to let people give feedback on it. We have not seen anything from the other 3 or 4 people putting something together. I know a lot of the Republicans were very partial to my idea until they have one of their own members, Representative Luck, who's pushing something, and she won't, I have no idea what she's doing. She won't, I had a long conversation with her, but they're all holding off to see what Luck's coming up with because, they want to be team members.
Do you feel legislators are currently exploiting the system to increasing the proportion of legislators that were not elected?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, a few are. I mean, there's always a wide variety of people, in any organization. So, and I don't blame anyone who does. It's the rules we have, and a lot of the attacks on the proposal I have is, well, people, you won't get good people or no one will want to run. But if you change the rules of the game, people will change how they play. And I've been very impressed with my colleague, Rep. Garcia, and the person she replaced, Rep. Benavides. They have been so open and honest. And Garcia came in as an appointee and said that system was so jacked up, it felt like a coronation, not an election. And Rep. Benavides, and so she's been a big proponent for reform, even though she was a vacancy appointee. And Rep. Benavides, I talked to her for like an hour and a half and was very open and honest and said, yeah, I resigned and I tried everything in my power to set the table to make sure Rep. Garcia got selected. So a lot of others will say, oh, no, we're trying to do a fair and open process. It's just happened. But, I think some people, you can see how the process plays out. And we're not really respecting the voters at all by what we're doing.
Senator Daugherty, would you like to comment?
Sure. I would say I wouldn't go as far as to speak negatively about any of my colleagues or anything like that. But I think that for me, when I look at this process, the biggest thing is ensuring that it's democratic, which to me means opening up to as many folks as possible in your district and as many voters that you can get to have a voice, because that's who's representing you. And so which is why, again, it was so important to me to look at what other states do. And I think when you look at most other states holding a special election, it's because, even though it might take time to fill the seat eventually, and that's why also we're proposing a hybrid system as well in the legislation that we're working on. I think it's the most democratic, and it's tricky because, I think everyone has. I think you can pick apart a lot of the solutions, but until you come up with a better solution yourself, we just have to go with what we can figure out and how to make this system as democratic as possible and opening it up to as many people as possible. And so that's just truly where I'm coming from in this whole process.
Great. Thank you very much. We appreciate hearing from you both, and we appreciate your time and your efforts to keep Colorado democratic, and that's democratic with a small d. Next up, thank you. Next up is a partner in a newly created coalition known as Team Transparency, of which LWVCO is a part. And I bet there is some curiosity about this one. John Caldara, the president of the Independence Institute. John started his political career in 1994 when he was elected to the board of directors of the RTD, Regional Transportation District, one of the largest governments in Colorado, later becoming chairman of the board. He's also a journalist and media personality, serving as a columnist for the Boulder Daily Camera and the Denver Post, as well as Sunday editorial columnist for the Denver Gazette, the Colorado Springs Gazette, and Colorado Politics. His current affairs television program, Devil's Advocate with John Caldara, airs on Colorado Public Television, Channel 12, Friday nights at 8:30. You can hear him hosting radio talk shows on Denver's 630 KHOW and 850 KOA. Caldara is a veteran of many political battles, running campaigns against tax and debt increases and in favor of various reforms that the League typically opposes. Among other things, he's serving as convener of Team Transparency, a diverse coalition of organizations and individuals working together to repeal all or parts of SB 24-157, which exempted the Colorado General Assembly from Colorado open meetings laws, and to monitor and potentially strongly oppose changes to Colorado open records laws. In a recent article, he described the collaboration with LWVCO as odd bedfellows. While I certainly agree, I believe it's also proof that LWVCO is truly a nonpartisan organization. And I'd like to note that it's not our first collaboration with Independence Institute. We also worked with them on Amendments Y and Z. John's greatest pride is being father of 3 amazing children. Daughter Parker, who died of cancer in 2001. Daughter Piper, who came along to save him in 2002. and Wildman Chance, born in 2004, who either because or despite of his Down syndrome is the frat brother that John never had. Welcome, John.
Thank you so very much for having me. I'm doing this from my basement, and my frat brother is upstairs. So if some crazed man comes barreling down in his boxer shorts, don't be surprised. First, let me say I hope we can have a lot of questions. So if you have some questions, just get them out there. I think that's a wonderful thing. And as far as who I am, I think a lot of folks in the League of Women Voters probably know that because we've been on the opposite sides of so many things. That is to say, you guys have been wrong about just about everything. But it is amazing. The Independence Institute, while a libertarian/conservative free market organization, is not an R organization. We're not a partisan organization. We find ourselves at odds with Republicans all the time. One of the things that we have been involved with over our nearly 40 years is governmental transparency, so much so as to help pass transparency initiatives at the ballot box, including, I think it was Proposition 104 to open up negotiations between school unions and their school districts so that parents and the public and journalists can witness it. I think it's very, very important that citizens be able to see what is going on at the Capitol, no matter what your political leanings. But it's much more than that. Colorado has 5,000 governments and local districts. That is a good and bad thing. The good thing is that it keeps government close to the people and very, very accessible. The bad thing is it's really hard to get good information and public information to become public. We run a news site called CompleteColorado.com. I hope you visit it. And we do a lot of investigative journalism. And we find that it's been really difficult in our research and in reporting to get simple information from governments. What we find, quite simply, is that the cost is outrageous. That to get digital information, which is easy to get, a lot of governments will charge ridiculous amounts of money for people to see what's going on in their government. The other part of that is how inconsistent these governments are. I remember a research project we did on colleges, and we had a Colorado Open Records Act question, and we sent it to all the schools in Colorado, the colleges and universities. Some gave us the information for free. Some charged us thousands of dollars. Some wouldn't give it to us and required us to go down and find it in person and pay for it. Some called us up afterwards and said, hey, did you get the information? Is there anything else that you like? Now, that type of inconsistency among governments makes it really hard for citizens and citizen groups to get involved and know what's going on. We can find things out after the fact, but that's not good enough for people to get involved in government. It wasn't until pretty recently, until this odd coalition came together, that I even found out that only 2 other states don't live stream or televise their committee meetings in the Capitol. This is where the heavy lifting of government happens in these 20 or so committees that decide what lives and what dies before it goes to the House or Senate floor, but we're not allowed to see them, which is odd given that since COVID, each one of these rooms has a live camera and live monitors, and people, including legislators and staff, Zoom in to watch the proceedings and to testify, but a citizen cannot. So if you live in Durango and you're interested in what goes on in a committee meeting, you need to drive up and spend the night to do that. This is just bad politics. And I think it's some hubris that happens when we have one party rule, either party rule over time. The hubris hit a dramatic point last year when the legislature passed, as Beth mentioned, Senate Bill 157, I believe it was, I've been doing politics for a long time in Colorado. I have never seen anything so obnoxious, anti-democratic, closed door as this. It basically exempted the state legislature, and only the state legislature, from large swaths of the open meetings laws and the open records laws. It allowed them to have private conversations offline that disappear on disappearing apps and would not give us agendas of what their meetings were being about. So in other words, it was a way to, in Chicago style, make deals outside of the legislature and then in front of everyone do what was already negotiated. That's Chicago style backroom politics. And a lot of people say, oh, that won't really happen. Well, along came the summer special session on property taxes, and they immediately used their newfound powers of privacy. In a very secret police-like way, they were able to do their negotiations without us knowing what they were talking about and without any real public participation. This incensed us so much at Independence, we quickly brought together a citizens initiative, which we do very often, to reverse 157. And that's all it did, because it's all the time we had for it to do anything, and we just wanted to see where it was. We went out and did some polling on it, and it won't surprise you that people don't like the idea of government operating in darkness, and they would likely pass it. But when we thought about it, the cost of getting something on the ballot is very, very high. And that's the signature gathering part. It can cost about $1 million to get something on the ballot. And it can cost about $1.5 million sometimes to get something that's constitutional, because you need to get signatures in every state Senate district. We forfeited the opportunity to go forward with that, because for that amount of cost and brain damage, just to get us where we were, seemed like a not good use of limited and scarce resources. And then we thought, you know what? I bet we're not the only people who feel incensed about this. How about some of those crazy groups that are smart enough to oppose us all the time? I wonder how they feel. And one of our first calls was, of course, to the League of Women Voters, and to Beth and her team. The answer was, let's talk. Let's see what we can do about this. And so I said, well, if they're willing to come together at an odd table, how about all the other people that I've incensed over the years with my terrible humor and outrageous political position? So I called up the Colorado broadcasters. They were in. I called up the Colorado Press Association. They were more than in. I called up Colorado Public Radio, one of my favorite targets for criticism, and they were in. We called up Common Cause, and they were in, and I believe the ACLU is also joining us. This, along with all sorts of activist groups, the Colorado Times Recorder, which is a progressive political / news outfit, and they were in. So never before in the nearly 40 years of coalition work and work that we've done in Independence Institute have I ever seen such a wildly diverse, truly different coalition than this. And someone nicknamed it Team Transparency, and I like it. And over the last several months, Beth and I and folks from the Colorado Freedom of Information Coalition have been trying to tune some political work for during the session, but our larger goal is to pass some type of constitutional amendment that future legislators just can't ignore that easily. Something that would give us better open records access, better open meetings access, more consistency to find what is going on, and something that goes back and makes sure that there is retention of these minutes, retention of the meetings as well. You know, it's odd, every obnoxious tweet or email that I've ever written ever since it started is sitting on some Google server, but in the legislature, they will only save their emails for, 60 or 90 days. And in a 120-day session, that means by the time we find out what the issue is, you can't go back to find these things. So we are in the midst of working together to craft a constitutional amendment. One of the things we do at Independence, I think better than most any group in Colorado, is work on the citizens initiative side. There are things that the legislature will never pass. There are things that we see as safety valves. For us, that includes the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, which no politician, left or right, wants to pass because it requires them to ask permission to raise taxes. Open meetings laws, term limits, ethics laws. None of these things are passed by the legislature. Why would they? And now we see the hubris that the legislature has to ignore them and to go around them. We need a constitutional amendment to guarantee that not just the press, but the growing amount of citizen press, the growing amount of activists and organizations get to know when government action is happening, what that action will happen, and to be able to witness it. That doesn't mean we want personnel records. It doesn't mean we want to dive into people's private issues, but it means that the spirit of open meetings and open records is something we all have a stake in. And to see this coalition, many of us who are at war on other issues, to come together and say, we want this, I'm pretty clear on saying this is something that the legislature has noticed, and I expect big things. To that, I tell you what, why don't we open it up to any questions you might have or anything else that you'd like to talk about, except that I'm very excited about this. We're at the beginning of this journey. You should know that initiatives like this likely will not be able to be on the ballot this year. By a law that we truly despise, only tax increases or revenue increases can be put on odd numbered years. Tax cuts can only be put on every other year, so we find that pretty unfair. The legislature gets to write their own language when they put something on the ballot. So when they do something like Prop HH or others, they write what you see on the ballot, which means, in my mind, they fib. They say things without raising taxes or to reduce property taxes. When we, the citizens, put something on the ballot, we have this long, arduous process we have to go through, and it goes up to a 3-person board, and they write what is going to be on the ballot, which is remarkably different. So it's a long process. Short answer is, unless we tie some sort of tax increase to it, which I don't think we'll be doing, it'll likely be on next year's ballot, where there's more voter participation as well. And we're always looking for groups to join this coalition, because I think that's going to be the key to our success. And again, I've just been really honored to work with so many different people, and it's been a real joy to meet and learn more from these other groups. And with that, why don't I ask you if you have any questions? I'll leave it to Beth to shoot them to me.
Great. Linda.
Okay, so I'm wondering, when I spoke to a legislator about Senate Bill 157, he told me that when meetings are open to the public includes not only you and me, but also lobbyists. And then it gets weird because they're always scrambling for the lobbyist money, right? And so they feel like they have to pay attention to the lobbyists. So that told me that essentially, really what they're asking us to do is give up our transparency because they've got a problem with money in politics. What do you think?
We are all lobbyists. Let us remember that by Colorado's, I think it's either Article 4 or 5 of the state constitution, you and I are legally part of the legislature. We exercise our rights to do that through the initiative process and the referendum process. And you're right, there are lobbyists there. Guess what? The lobbyists are paid to be there. Some of us aren't paid. but our voices should be heard too. And just because politicians cater to special interest groups doesn't mean that they should do things in the dark. I find that to be an absolute cop-out response that because people who are trying to pressure us to do things are going to watch us decide what we're doing and our horse trading, that's wrong. Well, we're the people who want to pressure you to do things. We're the ones who write the letters and the phone calls. And oh, by the way, you work for us. How dare you do this behind closed doors? And I can't help but ask, what the hell are you hiding? What is it that you don't want us to see? It's not that difficult. Why is it that your communications are destroyed through instant apps that erase communications? Why do you have a retention policy that destroys them after 60 or 90 days? You know, it is insulting. It is absolutely insulting. And I'm sorry that legislators have a hard time standing up to lobbyists. Maybe we should vote in some politicians that are less corruptible.
Okay, Representative Marshall, bring it. You're muted, Representative?
No, he's a representative. You can keep him muted.
Yeah. So I appreciate it as a guest. Let me ask questions. I wanted to stay because I saw who the next guest was. Because that Senate bill was an absolute reaction to the lawsuit Rep. Epps and I brought, where we got the injunction on the entire state legislature to stop violating the open meeting laws. So I find it real disingenuous.
By the way, remind us, it was a successful lawsuit that you brought. And I want to thank, on behalf of all Coloradans, thanks for doing that.
Yeah, but part of the point of that, it was so open and blatant, it's very disingenuous for so many people in the press and that were down at the Capitol to say, oh, we're shocked. I can't believe this was going on. It was so blatant. And I did a lot of research and had some legislators from the late 80s or early 80s contact me and say, what was going on? Because the citizens put the open meeting law in place in 1974 by a 20-point margin. The legislature sued to get out of it under the First Amendment. 1982, the Colorado Supreme Court unanimously said, no, you must follow these rules too. And they were, but somewhere over the next 20 years, it just kept going down and down and down. And I don't blame our leadership. They inherited that swamp. It had been going on forever. But what I would say, and I voted against that bill, but what I would say is we don't have secret illegal meetings anymore. We just have secret meetings. And I do think that's a big step forward, because what they did pare back, we are following it now. So just saying you're going to put a law in place without any kind of enforcement, because again, no one was following that stuff anyway. So when people say, oh my God, they took the law, they changed the law, it's like, well, they weren't following it. So some of that is, like I said, it's at least an improvement that what they pared back. And my colleague Rep. Epps made the very good point to me when we were getting ready to do the lawsuit, because the legislature, it really was too onerous. How much, the law was put in 74 and how we interact electronically and the like. There needed to be some reforms to it. And I asked her, why have we not done these reforms? Because we have the ability. This is ridiculous. And she made the very astute point to me that, Bob, there's a lot of people who don't want to make it something workable, because if it's workable, then we'll be expected to follow it. So I would stress that if you're going to go forward with something, you do work on something that makes it something that people will be willing to follow, because it was very easy to say it was so onerous, we don't follow anything. And then the really important parts were thrown out because it was very easy for so many to justify it in their heads.
If I could respond on a couple things. One, when it comes to streaming of committee meetings, your executive committee of the Legislative Council, the leadership of both parties, all it takes is a vote of those few people to open that up. And I find it wild that they have been lobbied now for 6 straight years by the Colorado Channel Network to open up those meetings. It doesn't even take a vote of the entire legislature. So I please urge you, Bob, and your colleagues to put some pressure on your leadership to turn on the damn cameras. They are right there. You just need to flip it to public from private. On your and the other part of this, yeah, the people voted this in, and democracy in the people's house should be open. But let's remember, it's not just the legislature, even though they exempted themselves. Most government is on the school board level and the Parks and Rec level, and we want to have openness throughout that. And what the legislature has done now is put forward a precedence that other governments are looking at. I know even Boulder is looking at closing off some of their meetings and some of their communications. And I understand that this needs to be looked at. And if there's problems, we ought to have a conversation about it. And we're happy to do it. But don't be surprised when the voters react angrily to seeing that they cannot have access in this high-tech age to what's going on in committee rooms and communications in 5,000 governments. So I appreciate all the work you've been doing to make that better. And I appreciate greatly the lawsuit.
Okay, we have time for one more question to stay on time here. If anyone, if we don't get to your questions, we will send them to the speaker, and hopefully they'll get back to you. So please feel free to continue to put questions in the chat. Jerry Cummins.
I think he just answered my question. I wanted some clarification on whether the proposal would cover all 5,000 entities of governmental existing in Colorado.
That is the hope. Now, mind you, we are at the beginning of this, and since we're not the legislature, the beautiful thing about the legislature is they can put something on the ballot and it costs them nothing. And they can put something on the ballot and they can decide what the ballot language is that people read on the ballots that are mailed to them. We citizens, when we do this, can't do either one. It costs us a lot to put it on the ballot, and we don't have any control of what it reads like, which is why you have so many bizarre ballot titles that say "there in connection therewith, shall we do this, that, or whatever." It's because there's a bureaucratic committee that puts it together. So we'll be refining that. I should let you know that the same group that writes the title, before they do that, have to decide whether or not it's a single subject. Again, the legislature doesn't really have to do that. They get to decide themselves what a single subject is. We have to go in front of this board and say, no, this is a single subject, even though it changes some state law and the state constitution and something else. So it'll be a process. I just why don't I leave it as this? One, invite you all to go to our website, thinkfreedom.org, sign up for our newsletter if you want to hear my insane ramblings. Go to completecolorado.com for news and views and other things. But let me urge the league to continue to work with us the way that Beth and others have, so that as we polish this and get it tightened, it's there for the long haul. The last thing we really want to do is just have a knee-jerk reaction to 157 and throw something out in anger. We want a very well thought of, prepared initiative. And thanks to the league and the Jeff Roberts at the Freedom of Information Coalition and our legal counsel, I think I've got a lot of promise that we're going to do this right. And thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, John. We really enjoyed your talk, and we are excited to work with you in coalition to protect people's rights to know and to keep Colorado government in the sunshine. So I'm going to introduce myself. I am Katina Frierson. I'm the Development and Communications Director here at LWVCO, and I get the great pleasure of introducing our next speaker, who is a very valued colleague of mine, Andrea Wilkins. She is our legislative liaison. Andrea helps develop and implement the LWVCO advocacy agenda provides direct lobbying of the Colorado General Assembly, engages in coalition building activities and grassroots mobilization, and provides logistical and technical support to the LWVCO Legislative Action Committee. She has a broad background in public policy and law, focusing on good governance, intergovernmental relations, human services, and nonprofit support. Prior to joining LWVCO, Andrea spent several years in private practice handling a family law caseload and was a program director with the National Conference of State Legislatures, where she performed policy and legal research, provided expert testimony, technical assistance, and bill drafting, and authored numerous policy publications. She has a JD and MA in International Relations from the University of Denver and a BA in Political Science and Women's Studies from the University of New Mexico. So again, my great pleasure introducing Andrea. She's going to speak next.
Thanks, Katina. I appreciate the introduction. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Got a few slides for you today as we talk about the Colorado Voting Rights Act, and I'm hopeful that everyone, are you able to see this? I'm sorry, now I can't see any of you. Not yet, okay. Let's see, I think I've got it now. Let me get it on presentation mode and I think we're good to go. Okay, hopefully that did it. All right, I'm really excited to talk to you all today about the Colorado Voting Rights Act. This is one of our top legislative priorities for 2025. And I want to start by giving you a little bit of background because this work is being done similar to the effort that John just talked about. This is another effort that LWVCO is involved in that is part of a large coalition, a big collaborative effort amongst many stakeholder groups that we often work with, groups that are really focused on civil rights and civic engagement, and we're really happy to be working alongside so many organizations that are really focused on ensuring that our voting rights and access to the election process broadly are protected. To give you a little bit of background on the coalition itself, as I mentioned, it's a broad group of people. Early on, I would say well over a year at this point, LWVCO came into the conversation with Common Cause and the Harvard Elections Law Clinic. The staff from Harvard, which includes one of the LWVCO former board members, Denise Miller, were interested in providing model VRA legislation for states that were interested in pursuing state level protections. And as they approached Colorado as a state that might be interested in sort of tightening up some things and ensuring protections for voters across the board in Colorado, I think they felt that Colorado was really a state that might be interested in such a thing and sort of ripe for some action here. So, the ball got rolling. We started those conversations and the coalition began to grow. It includes a whole host of organizations now, such as Mi Familia Vota, the ACLU of Colorado, NAACP of Colorado, Colorado Black Women for Political Action, New Era. There is a big long list that you will be able to see on the bill fact sheet that has just been updated and I believe ready for circulation. So that's something that we can share with you all now. But I know I'm limited off many groups, but I just kind of wanted to give you a sense that this is a big, well-rounded coalition that have come together to really kind of take a look at that model legislation that Harvard put forth, and we began to analyze it and really figure out, how do we customize this towards Colorado? How do we take into account that we already have a strong election system, but there's always room for improvements. There's things that we could do to strengthen rights, and importantly, Colorado can continue to act as a leader in protecting rights and promoting access to sound elections through the passage of a state level act in light of a lot of the dilution that we are seeing to the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965. So that gives you a little bit of context about how and why all this came together. I do want to mention that there is the Colorado VRA Lobby Day planned for March 3rd. More information will be following on that, but we're looking forward to having a strong showing from LWVCO. So we want to make sure and get that on people's calendars. Okay, so on to the bill itself. This bill was introduced as Senate Bill 1 on the first day of the session. It's sponsored by Julie Gonzalez in the Senate and Jennifer Bacon and Jeannie Joseph in the House. It's been set to go to a hearing in Senate State Affairs probably sometime in mid-February. We do not have the date set in stone yet, but we are expecting it to come up relatively soon. The overarching goal of the bill is to provide additional protections against discriminatory voting rules and election practices. Importantly, the bill creates a private cause of action that allows individuals that have been aggrieved, essentially discriminated against in terms of their voting rights or access, or organizations that are focused on civil rights and voting access, organizations such as LWVCO, that can bring a cause of action to allege that this discrimination has taken place and put forward solutions to rectify the situation. There's an effort to increase the ability of communities of color to challenge unfair district maps that lead to vote dilution. And the act will empower the Colorado Attorney General to enforce voting rights under the Colorado VRA. I want to talk about a few key components of the bill. One is that it creates protections specifically for LGBTQ+ voters against voting discrimination based on gender identity, gender expression, or sexual orientation. The idea is to give some similar protections to what we see set out for members of protected classes based on race, minority status, that sort of thing, minority language status, all that. So special protection has been carved out there. There's an effort to improve access for voters living on tribal reservations. There's a requirement for additional notice and information on supports for individuals with disabilities to be provided. Requirements for improved language access at the municipal level. And importantly, very much from a league standpoint, improved election-related data collection to really give us a better sense of what the voting landscape in Colorado looks like, and really support the work of the Colorado redistricting commissions. LWVCO members brought their expertise to the table on this and were really critical in making sure that this was included and the language is what it needs to be. And so we're really proud of this section of the bill. Okay, so I want to say just a little bit about the various components of the bill that I just referenced, starting with improved access for those on tribal reservations. The first component that you'll see referenced on the slide here is dealing with voter registration and the ability for voters on reservations to use the tribal headquarters address or an address approved by the tribal council within each precinct. There needs to be a dedicated address within each precinct that members can use. And the reason for this is that oftentimes, and of course this is the case in Colorado as well, reservations are located in very remote areas, and sometimes people's residential addresses are not recognized by the U.S. Postal Service. So this is an attempt to make sure that as people register to vote, if they have such an address, that there's an alternate that can be used to make sure that they are able to get registered and to receive their ballot just like anyone else would. The other provision for specific to the tribes is that the tribal council can request a VSPC on the reservation for election day and for any number of days during the 15 period leading up to the election. So it's just really, another attempt to ensure easy access for voting. Notice for individuals with disabilities is another important area that's being addressed. Essentially, this is requiring that entities that receive state funding to provide services to primarily individuals with disabilities, that they are required to display voting registration information, information on voting rights, and voting related accessibility accommodations for the individuals that they're serving. There's really kind of an effort to educate and make sure that people are aware of their rights. The information displayed also has to include the contact for the Secretary of State Accessibility Coordinator, as well as the location of the nearest drop box and VSPC. In terms of multilingual ballot expansion, we're seeing some activity in this effort as well. Some of you will recall that LWVCO was part of the effort to get multilingual ballot access at the county level in Colorado. The Colorado Voting Rights Act would expand upon that to bring that concept to qualifying municipalities, whereby the municipal clerk would be required to create a sample ballot as well as an in-person minority language ballot for qualifying counties. So people would be able to study the sample ballots, determine their vote in a language that's comfortable for them. For those that then want to also vote a ballot in a language other than English that is most comfortable for them, they have the ability to do that by going to their VSPC and getting that in-person ballot. Qualifying counties consist of qualifying counties are the threshold for current law. So I want to reference it because it's going to expand to municipalities, assuming the Colorado VRA passes in this form with the same provision. So current law provides that qualifying counties are those that have at least 2,000 citizens, 18 or older, or 2.5% of their citizens in a county that speak English less than very well and speak another common language. In Colorado, I believe the number is 20 counties that are subject to this provision, and the language that the ballot needs to be provided in is Spanish. And then again, the Colorado VRA would expand upon that concept to bring that to the municipal level for those municipalities that meet that threshold. Okay, so I mentioned the election related data collection. This is something that's a big priority for the league, and we're really pleased with the input that our members have been able to provide into this section of the law. Essentially what's happening here is that the Colorado VRA will establish a statewide election database and information office within the Department of State to assist political subdivisions with compliance. Also assist with elections administration best practices, implementing those practices to really continue to improve upon our election administration, and to help them in investigating the potential voting rights violations that come to their attention. There would also be a requirement that there be collection of election results data at the precinct level for all state and political subdivision elections, which would include primary elections, to support the work of the Colorado redistricting commissions. It really just kind of gives us a better sense of what the voting landscape looks like, what the voting trends are. There's some key analysis that can be better performed with this information that will now be collected upon passage of the Colorado VRA, and that really helps improve the map drawing process that the redistricting commissions will engage in. Colorado VRA does require that the data be publicly available, and it has to be retained for a period of 12 years. So really the intent there is to build up a good body of research over the 10-year period that takes place from when the redistricting commissions meet. So by the time we hit 2030 and those commissions meet again, we'll be in the process of collecting data, and then going forward, we'll be sure to have a full decade plus worth of information that can guide their work and their analysis. So with that, I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen and see if there are any questions. I know we may be short on time. I'm not sure if the governor has joined us yet.
He has.
Great.
So if we could potentially hold questions on this, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we will get back to you via email, or hopefully if you're a member, you can come to our meeting on Wednesday, January 29th.
All right.
Back to Andrea.
Thank you, Beth. All right, to be continued. Let's turn to our next speaker that I am very honored to introduce, Governor Jared Polis.
Thanks, Andrea. Hi, everybody. Good to see you all. Thanks to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event. I was asked to talk about some of the work I've been doing through the National Governors Association on Disagree Better, as well as the work that we're doing on educating all Americans for success. Let's get ready. So those two key things. The work to disagree better is really strengthening our skills to have tough conversations, leaning into it, especially at the governor level. When we disagree on issues, we can still respect one another. I work closely with Utah Governor Spencer Cox. He's a Republican, I'm a Democrat, to really continue the values and the lessons of Disagree Better, including really respecting different voices and understanding that it's okay and in fact wonderful to disagree with one another. If we all had the same opinions, life would be not very interesting. We can disagree passionately and empathetically, but still work together with mutual respect and with dignity. And that's the kind of disagreement that the founding fathers modeled. It's really a big part of what makes democracy work, because robust debate between people who disagree is the foundation of a strong and healthy democracy and of healthy communities. I feel that, well, of course, there's room for improvement everywhere. We try our best to make this the Colorado way, coming together in our state to move forward with our goals to build a bright future. We welcome ideas from the left, the right, everywhere to make Colorado more affordable, safer, more livable, sustainable now and for generations to come. And there's a lot more work to be done. I'm now working with National Governors Association on Let's Get Ready, Educating All Americans for Success, really looking at how we can better make sure that the work we're doing in our schools is preparing students for successful outcomes. So we know that very often high school diploma alone doesn't open the door to enough good paying jobs. But when kids can graduate high school with a skill, yesterday I was in Pueblo, high school students getting degrees in welding concurrent with their high school diploma. Many examples across our state where if students are entering the workforce, they're ready. If they're going on to college, they don't need remediation and they can graduate in 3 or 4 years with a full bachelor's degree. They graduate high school, they might only need 1 year for an associate's degree. We also have many students who graduate high school with an associate's degree ready to be employed. So those are the areas of work that I'm working on nationally with the Governors Association, and I appreciate being invited to share them with you today.
Excellent. Anything else for us, Governor?
No, I saw you were discussing vacancy committees. I think that's wonderful that we can hopefully reform and open up that process. It is in my opinion, a flaw in our democracy that a very small group of people are able to place legislators that have the same authority as those elected by the entire electorate. So if we can help in any way, let us know.
Great. Thank you, Governor Polis. We appreciate your time in joining us today and your leadership in our beautiful state.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Next up is Marcia Johnson, Esquire, the Chief Counsel for the League of Women Voters of the United States. She leads the organization's advocacy and litigation teams, overseeing the strategic direction of their program, government affairs, and litigation efforts. Marcia began her career as a voting rights lawyer when she joined the Lawyers Committee in 2004 as part of the team organizing the first election protection program during a presidential election. Since then, Marcia has worked with state and national partners to educate voters about their voting rights, build programs to provide real-time help so that voters can cast ballots that will be counted, advocate for voting rights legislation, and provide support to litigation that challenges suppressive laws or practices. In 2005, she organized the first of 2 national commissions that researched and documented the record of discrimination in voting. This research was a part of the record used by Congress to support the reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act in 2006. In 2014, the Second National Commission updated the research of voting discrimination to support the call for legislation to restore the full protections of the Voting Rights Act. That advocacy continues. Additionally, she served on and supported the litigation team defending the first challenge to the constitutionality of the 2006 reauthorization of Voting Rights Act. Marcia is a national speaker on voting rights. She's testified before Congress and has appeared in national media discussing voting rights challenges and solutions. She and her daughter Justina are featured in the international documentary Democracy Maybe, a series exploring the challenges faced by democracies around the globe. Marcia received her Juris Doctor from Villanova University School of Law and her Bachelor of Science in Linguistics from Georgetown University. I know I was thrilled when Selena Stewart was announced as our LWVUS's new president, and I had no idea that she'd be opening up her position to such a distinguished and fantastic choice. So I'm honored to introduce Marcia. Welcome.
Thank you, Beth. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
So I'm very excited to be with you today. This is my first League Legislative Conference, and I'm really honored to be here with you. It's also happening at the same time as our national board meeting. I found a nice quiet corner to present to you, but I apologize in advance if there are any background distractions. This is, it's really timely that we're having this conversation at the end of what has been quite a week. And, today I'm here to share with you how the national office is planning and executing our work in this new environment. And I wanted to start off by sharing some observations about the week that has passed, what it portends for the work moving forward, and how we are approaching that work. And then I'll be sure to leave some time to answer any questions you may have. So I think that the new Trump administration 2.0, so we're calling it, would like us to characterize what they're doing as the era of fear and chaos. And I feel that it's really important for us not to succumb to that frame and to organize our work in a way that allows us to ensure that they're unsuccessful in this new era that they unleashed upon us. We've seen significant executive orders that have been introduced that have been getting a lot of attention. And we've seen the beginnings of deportations and increasing fear in communities that we work with. And I want to acknowledge the impact of the executive orders, but also to put them in context, because executive orders must follow the law and the Constitution. And we've seen executive orders such as the attack on birthright citizenship as not falling into that category. And I was really heartened to hear the federal judge in Washington State push back against even the creation of such an order. And one of the things, we're going to be looking at is how are our courts responding to unlawful actions, even from the executive, and how the executive is responding to the injunction by those courts, which I think is going to be really important signposts for us to look at. We've also seen the rescission of President Biden's executive orders, all of 60, more than 60 of them, including the rescission of the voting access executive order. And what is particularly troubling and noteworthy about the rescission is that, it's usual practice for presidents when they go in to set their agenda by looking at what executive orders their predecessor, if it was from a different party, had, and creating their own and having a rescission of previous decisions, executive orders. But what's noteworthy here is that it's not just the rescission of the order saying we will not continue to do a particular body of work. It also comes with a requirement that the agencies file a report about what work was done under the previous order, and so that they could be identified to have that work undone. So with the voting access executive order, for example, President Biden had asked the federal agencies to ensure that there were mechanisms for voter registration opportunities. And so one of the things we're going to be on the lookout for is how those opportunities from federal agencies are being undermined or removed moving forward. The other executive order that I just wanted to flag, which are the executive orders concerning DEI, and which are basically attacks on our civil rights infrastructure, because these executive orders are worded in such a way that they suggest that our civil rights laws against racial discrimination, against discrimination for people with disabilities, against discrimination for women are no longer in effect, and that's not so. And so one of the things we're going to be looking at is the federal government following federal law against discrimination, because and really distinguishing between the narrative to push forward a certain political view of the world and what the law actually says and how that law is being implemented. And so that's something we're going to be looking at really carefully, and getting to, how the national office is looking at these issues is first we started with lessons learned from the previous Trump administration, where we fell into a whack-a-mole. There was so much incoming, and the tendency was feeling we have to respond to everything. And your impact gets diffused if you're running around pivoting from one thing to the next, trying to respond to it all, because the idea of shock and awe is a very deliberate tactic to have us scattered. And so having learned lessons from that the previous Trump administration, we decided on what we're calling focused and disciplined approach to responding to the attacks that are of our agenda that are coming from the administration. And so we developed the Women Defend Democracy campaign, which has tiers of response. The first response, and we've divided that into 3 categories: gold, silver, and bronze. And so the gold category leans on our strengths. What are we good at? What is our focus? What is our lodestar? And that's protecting democracy, voting rights, and democratic institutions. And we can bring all the weight of our knowledge, experience, networks to protect those. So falling into the gold category are democracy, education, and election administration support, restoring and defending voting rights protections, abolishing the Electoral College, which is our moonshot campaign, protecting the democracy organizations and institutions, and protecting reproductive freedoms if attacked on the national level. So if there's like a national abortion ban. The other two categories are silver and bronze categories. Look at how can we partner effectively with those who take the lead on these issues. So the silver are immigration, the ERA, and defending against attacks on DEI and the LGBTQIA plus community. And so, working really closely with partners those are primary issues to lend our support. And then our bronze category, we're looking at the impact of government shutdowns, the closing of the Department of Education, broader immigration policy proposals, beyond those that we've been focused on as a league, climate change, gun safety, healthcare, and the attempts to dismantle Obamacare. And again, we want to make sure that we're weighing in, but weighing in effectively. In the gold category, those are areas where we've determined we lead. And in the other categories, we support and we show up as a very effective partner to our allies in those areas. So since this past week, what we've been doing is analyzing the executive orders that have come out. And I hope you've all seen the week 1 statement from our CEO, Selena, which summarizes what we've seen and how we're responding to that. And again, because our goal is not to be scattered, but to really effectively lead in the response to what we're seeing. I also wanted to lift up how we're looking at what's happening in the states. Well, first, before I get to that, Congress, right? So I talked about what's happening on the executive branch. One of the things that is going to be coming up in this Congress is the SAVE Act. And that's the act which is the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. But the reality of this act is that it is trying to make it harder for eligible voters to be able to vote by requiring documentary proof of citizenship in order to register to vote, making it harder to mail in voter registrations, making it harder to have online voter registrations because requiring the documentary proof of citizenship, enabling voter purges to make it to remove voters from the rolls, and requiring or allowing the use of really inaccurate databases to determine voter eligibility. And we've seen in states that have enacted this documentary proof of citizenship and also relying on these flawed databases that thousands of eligible voters have not been able to vote because of the false databases that have been used. And so this is something that we in the national level are going to be really working with our partners to push back strongly on. But we have been seeing that other states are also having these laws. Yes, we will be providing action alerts about the SAVE Act. We've also seen Arizona and Kansas already have documentary proof of citizenship requirements in order to vote and to register to vote. And we've seen there how eligible voters are affected. And so we're going to be really pushing back to make sure that this does not continue, is not prescribed on the federal level. But we also have states such as Louisiana and Tennessee who are also pushing for these in-state documentary proof of citizenship requirements. And, you know, I recognize in Colorado, you all are actually very well situated in terms of the opportunities that you provide in order for people to be able to vote. I've been at hearings in Congress where there's actually a competition between your senators and the senators from Minnesota about who has the highest voter turnout. And it's something that, you know, you really stand in contrast with a lot of other states in the rest of the country about, but your voice in pushing back against bills such as the SAVE Act and showing how you can provide opportunity and ensure safe and fair elections as a model, I think will be very important in this fight. So I will stop there for the moment and welcome any questions that you may have.
Excellent. Thank you, Marcia. Let's start with Kathy Wilson.
Thank you for all this information. It is so good. I couldn't write fast enough, so I'm hoping that on the U.S. Website you have the Women Defend Democracy all laid out so that we can look at it there. Is that correct?
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
The silver categories, I'm sorry, because there are hands up and I'm also looking at the chat. But just really quickly, immigration, the ERA, and defending against attacks on DEI and the LGBTQIA plus community are what's in the silver category.
Excellent. Edie.
Can you tell us just a little bit more about the SAVE Act? The title sounds good. So what's bad about it and why did LWVUS oppose it?
Right. So yeah, I call that the Orwellian title because it sounds good, but what it's going to do is make it harder for eligible citizens to be able to vote. And I mentioned the documentary proof of citizenship. So in order to register to vote, so what that means is that you would have to show your birth certificate in order to register to vote, to show proof of citizenship. Proponents of the bill argue, well, you could also show a passport, but not everyone has a passport. And in fact, as someone who's about to renew her passport, it's very expensive to get a passport. And we've also seen in states that have documentary proof of citizenship that they are eligible in order to register and to vote. There are eligible voters who do not have access to these documents and are not being allowed to vote. And the SAVE Act also requires aggressive purges of voters whose citizenship can be proven. And we've seen, and the way states that have been doing these purges is they rely on federal databases or even the DMV database, which is not always accurate. And so we've seen the voters in Arizona and in Kansas and vulnerable voters. So, for example, in Arizona, voters with tribal IDs have not, Native voters have had their voting rights affected by not being able to vote because they don't have the documentation required by the state. So, while the bill who's against integrity of our votes and making sure that they're safe and secure? No one. But the way they're going about it is by making it harder for certain voters to be able to vote.
Rona?
Marcia, I'm discouraged. We don't have the money or the wherewithal to make the noise to counteract some of the great communicators. Is there more that the league could be doing than we're doing right now?
Yeah, so we have been working very closely with our partners to amplify our voice. We're have the 700 plus leagues that can raise up our collective voices. And then we also have our partners in the space that we've been working very closely with so that we're amplifying our voice and making sure that we can push back effectively. And so we are looking at how we can use our partnerships and have a cumulative aligned response to the things that we're seeing to counteract, the challenge we face in terms of resources.
Susan Stark.
Yeah, I'm from Denver League, and I think one of the other pernicious things about acts like this SAVE Act are that they are an attempt to create fear about something that may or may not actually exist. There is data that shows that very few non-citizens actually ever get to vote. This is a way to scare people away from the whole process of voting or to keep them from voting. So I think this goes back to your original goals for League nationwide, which is to try to educate people so that they aren't, so that the fear that this administration might be trying to promulgate is not accepted by them. That's all the comment I have to make.
Marcia, did you want to respond or shall we move on to the next question?
No, I agree completely. You can move on to the next question.
Kathleen Milligan asks, how does the League's effort to oppose the SAVE Act work with the Colorado Voting Rights Act that Andrea talked about? And Andrea, if you would have any thoughts on this, please feel free to chime in.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what Andrea has to say because I wasn't part of that discussion.
Sure.
Well, really what the goal of the Colorado VRA is to provide some state level protections that can be enforced regardless of what happens at the federal level. So it's really intended to be kind of an additional layer of protection to sort of safeguard against any chipping away of rights that we might see at the federal level. And as everything's being drafted, it's all being done in consideration of compliance with existing state and federal law. So, certainly we wouldn't, we wouldn't want to find ourselves in a situation where anything was in conflict. But the idea really is to provide, state level protections that are in place regardless of what's happening at the federal level. So sort of really just kind of a separate thing.
Thanks, Andrea. Peggy. And you're muted, Peggy.
My career in public relations always leads me to think about enlisting investigative journalists. And I would think if the National League and your counterparts in Arizona and other states could put together a pitch for somebody like 60 Minutes to talk about how these voter suppression laws, and I think the league should start referring to the SAVE Act as a voter suppression law, because whoever names something owns the issue. And the, SAVE sounds like a wonderful thing, as Evie mentioned. Their lead time is probably pretty long, 60 minutes. And there are probably other news outlets that might take this on. But so the point is pointing out how the ones that are already on the books are damaging people like Native Americans, who were the first Americans. And it is most egregious to make it harder for the people who were here first to legally vote. The other people who are disadvantaged by these documentary laws are people over 80 who might still be very mentally sharp but no longer drive, so they don't have a driver's license. I remember an aunt who lived to be almost 100 was sort of befuddled when she no longer had a driver's license and needed that as an ID. So that's something that older white women and men that other constituents might be able to relate to more than a person of color.
So, Peggy, you really raised a good point about using the framing and the narrative of the people who are seeking to suppress the vote, and I'm taking that to heart. And
Wonderful.
and to your point about driver's licenses, this proof of citizenship goes beyond that, right? Because we're not just talking about having an ID in order to be able to vote. Do our driver's licenses indicate our citizenship? Right? And even real IDs don't have that. There are, what this bill is calling for is what they're calling an enhanced driver's license. And there are only about 5 states that have that enhanced voter driver's license that shows your citizenship. So it really is a bill that would make it really onerous on everyone to have to show not just a birth certificate, a certified copy of a birth certificate in order to be able to vote.
Some other messaging you might use is a return to the poll tax, that you are imposing a financial penalty. And I think everybody, or at least all of us over a certain age, have a negative connotation to a poll tax. Poll tax and voter suppression, I think, will make it much less defensible for people to support this act. And I am a disciple of George Lakoff, Lakoff, who talks about how to frame things that his book is called Don't Think of an Elephant. And it's sort of the everybody has this cognitive frame on which they receive information, whether it's that the government should be punitive or government should offer second chances. So It's very worthwhile read.
Yeah, I'm thinking of an elephant right now.
Thanks, Peggy.
Mhm.
Evie.
So I noticed that on your list you have the Equal Rights Amendment, and my women's groups have had a lot of discussion lately because Biden declared that it was approved, but the National Archives said it's not. So where do we stand on that, and what can we do about that?
Oh, that's a really good question, Evie, and it's something that we're looking at. The National worked very, very hard to push to get the amendment published before the end of the Biden administration. And it was particularly frustrating that President Biden did declare that he thinks the amendment has been ratified, but didn't go the extra step and ask the archivist to publish. And so we are looking into, we certainly don't have a friendly administration at this point, and it's something that we're looking at now as to how we move forward on this. But we did an incredible amount of work on it during Biden's lame duck and are assessing with our partners how best to move forward now.
Great, thank you. Jane.
Thank you,
Dunk.
Marcia. Yeah, thank you. I'm Jane Dunk. I'm the operations director at LWVCO, but I want to take a moment and thank you, Marcia. I think we will all sleep a little better tonight after hearing from you.
Great.
At this time, we have the pleasure of announcing a short break. So please enjoy it, and we'll start back up at 12 noon. And thank you, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome back. Our next segment is on immigration. With executive orders and threats coming out of the White House for the last few weeks, it's a timely topic. And I know that many of us are very concerned about the people directly affected, some of whom have lived alongside us for years, and others who are our newest neighbors. We have two partners on the front lines here to tell us about what they're doing and how we can help. First up is Beatriz Garcia, the Western Slope Regional Organizer for CIRC, the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition. Beatriz Garcia Waddell, born and raised in Guanajuato, Mexico, is a dedicated leader and community organizer, deeply committed to immigration rights, social justice, and equity. With a background in social communication and politics from La Salle, Bajío, she has been actively involved in promoting her culture and volunteering in various countries, tackling pressing social issues like mental health and housing access. Currently based in Durango, Colorado, Beatriz empowers immigrant communities as the Western Slope Regional Organizers for the Coalition for Immigrant Rights of Colorado. Recognized for her advocacy efforts, Beatriz is passionate about fostering social and racial justice through systemic solutions and empowerment models. She was recently awarded a scholarship to participate in the Culture of Health Leadership Institute for Racial Healing, demonstrating her dedication to creating a more equitable society. As the ACLU board president, Beatriz will continue to fight for the civil rights and liberties for all Coloradans. Welcome, Beatriz.
Thank you all for having me. Thank you for the introduction. I am so pleased and honored to be here, just sharing some important topics that for immigrant community, it has been really hard. This week is just a punch and another punch and a few things that we feel very heavy. So sharing this information with you not only will help us as members of this community in Colorado to give the opportunity to support others, but also advocate for ourselves. So with this, I'll share my screen very quick. Let's go and start. Okay, so I hope you can see now my screen. This is a general information, like I said, about knowing your rights. And I wanted to start saying that we are not an attorney. We are people in the community that wants to share information that is general for everyone and useful for everyone. We are not talking about specific situations or personal situations that might be different in any cases. So we are not giving personal or legal advice in this presentation. So before we start about talking about rights, I wanted to mention about the context in Colorado, what is happening and what has been happening in the maybe a few decades. In mid-20s, 2000s, sorry, Colorado had a lot of anti-immigrant policies. And very incredible that we in Colorado with Georgia and other states had this policy called or known as Show Me Your Papers law that requires enforcement agencies to report anyone that could be suspected, by being undocumented to ICE. And these policies really was creating a lot of issues regarding who were detaining and who were not. So during you know, after those years of having this law impacted our community, in our coalition, in relationship with other organizations all over Colorado, we now have a different environment, and I'm going to talk about those specific things that are helping Colorado to be protected. So with this context, we in 2013 started a statewide movement when we want to repeal the SB 90, like I mentioned, known as a Show Me Your Papers law. And we have a lot of people in the community who were affected, and these stories were definitely the ones make the change to be able to pass the repeal law. Later on, with this pressure that we had, all 64 Colorado sheriffs decided not to respect the immigration detention orders. Later on in 2019, Colorado became the 4th state to pass a law that at the state level to limit the collaboration between police and ICE. What that means is they impacted that police will no longer participate in or helping immigration agents. SB 83 in 2020, this law prohibits the civil arrest of a person who is present or about to go to a court, and then they cannot detain them while they're going or attending or returning for this court proceeding. So this is currently in our state law. Our protections, probably we are one of the strongest in all over the United States that have these kind of protections. So I wanted to mention a few more so you guys understanding how we feel now in Colorado with all the changes that are going to be happening. So like I mentioned before, repealing the Show Me Your Papers law. Now in Colorado, the ICE cannot make arrests around any courthouse. Also, there is the probation officers are prohibited from sharing information with ICE, although we don't know how they work collaboratively because it's not really open. But if there is any information that we can get about this collaboration, it's a reason to be investigated. You must be informed of your rights to refuse an interview with ICE when you are in jail or custody. And if you post a bond for someone who then deported, you will be entitled to a full refund. So this is kind of important to know because interpreting the law is also difficult. So how we can actually put action in those laws are going to be very important, and we need you to be able to pass this information with others to protect these laws. Okay, so it's also illegal in Colorado to threat or to report someone to immigration status. Like I say, if someone says, I'm gonna report you with ICE, and this threat is prohibited to do it in Colorado. So yeah, let's keep going with this presentation. And sorry that I'm gonna make it as brief as I can because this could be an hour or 2 hours, depending of in the extent knowledge that we can do. But Also, the immigration detentions are not possible in the jails. That means that right now, or it used to be that the federal agents were collaborating with local jails to be able to hold or retain immigrants in those jails. Now, these contracts are not allowed to be a detention for ICE. Also, our data in the past feel like it was not protected. So if like people wanted to look in our records for in the MVD or other records, now ICE cannot collaborate with these other departments to be able to get that information or share with them. It's honestly very difficult to also knowing what kind of information they're using. So we really wanted to acknowledge that there is so much that is happening in the internet world that we don't know how is being used, that information. So hopefully in the future we can amplify this law. There is other protections and resources that could be helpful for people to know, like one that we haven't speak is about the Colorado is the first state to offer unemployment to people or residents in Colorado who has no social security. Also, we have Covering All Coloradans, which is a program similar to Medicaid for undocumented minors and pregnant women. This program is being launched this month, so it's just starting. Also, other thing that I can mention, the driver's license in Colorado. Also, now they can apply after 30 days of residence in US. And in this case, they have to have the proof that they are being here for 30 days in Colorado. Okay, so now we're gonna go to the what are the rights that we want to protect. So maybe all of us pretty much have an understanding that we have a constitution, and this constitution applies to everyone in US. It doesn't matter what is your background, where were you born. If you are in United States, you are protected by the Constitution of United States. So there is, from those 27 amendments that we have in the Constitution, I wanted to really emphasize this time the 4th Amendment, the 5th, and the 6th. And the reason for this is that these specific amendments are applicable to when we are confronted the enforcement. It could be police, it could be sheriff, it could be ICE agents. It could be for any enforcement that we are confronting. So the 4th Amendment protects the citizens from unreasonable searches and seizures. It's also set a requirement for obtaining search warrants. And this is very important because sometimes people doesn't understand that, and they allowed or give consent, which is a more technical word, to be able to have the search without a warrant. So, and we're gonna talk about the probable cause more in deep in a little bit, but we really need to understand these concepts. So how we can be protected from our 4th Amendment could help us to have been arrested. The Fifth Amendment, the rights that protect us, I want to emphasize, is that we have to have a due process, which is the right to have a fair trial or protection for arbitrary government action. And I know that in the past, speakers today, they already are talking about those actions that the president has been done recently. There are against this amendment. So it's very important that you all keep in mind and also contacted your representatives regarding these very arbitrary actions that are happening. Other thing is self-incrimination, because when the enforcement agents are asking us questions, are very important that in this situation could be any information taken against you. So it's very important to remain silent and ask for an attorney. And there is other things to think about, but those two things are the most important that I want to highlight. And the Sixth Amendment basically is that you need to know what you are being charged for. So if you've been accused, we need to know what are those accusations, or why are they, or they want to detain you. Okay, so what is probable cause? Basically is, or refers to, this is the formal meaning, but is basically that evidence that the police has to start an investigation against you. And the major exception for this probable cause will be a requirement for many searches is the consent. So if I consent to have that search, I am giving them the opportunity to do it. So it's very important in how we're giving consent. And also we're gonna talk about the warrants. And basically this is how a warrant look, and sorry that it's been blurry. I think I took a screenshot from another screenshot, so I cannot like make it more blurry. But basically what I wanted to explain with this is we need to know how a search warrant looks like. What are the details and description that we need to know first to be able to be, this is a real search warrant. So basically it's a description of what it's searched for, the address, it has to be the address, how things are being sent to your home, exactly the date of that search warrant, and the signature of the judge. Okay, I'm gonna pass this and go to the next one. Now we're gonna make the difference to the arrest warrants. So the things that they look a little different, although we need to look also for other things to be able to see if that is a person, or if it is the person they want to detain is actually you. So there is many information there, and probably the language is complicated. So a lot of people maybe not be able to even understand this, but it needs to know needs to have the charges of your detention, your full name of the person who was or who is going to be arrested, the physical description of that person. In this case, it says in the example that I'm showing is white and Hispanic male. The date of birth, and it has to be exactly your date of birth, the social security, if they have social security, the date of that arrest, and the signature of the judge. Okay, so I am just timing myself and I'm pretty close to that. So Beth, if we need to stop at any time, just let me know. So here is something that I wanted to just be aware that ICE uses a whole also that really looks like a search warrant or arrest warrant, but these ordinances are no are optionals. You can decide or say no, this is not me because it doesn't have my full name. This is only a request, but you can say no. This needs to be a warrant for search or has to be an arrest warrant. A hold, it's not enough for someone to be detained. So I just wanted to acknowledge these three differences are very important so people can prevent to be detained by an ICE agent. Okay, so basically we are sharing this information with the public. This is kind of like the steps, like if you've been questioned, what are the things that you can do? And also how to make that difference between what is valid and what is an invalid warrant. And it's already, we say that the hold by ICE is not enough to actually detain or arrest someone. And remember, your right to remain silent is very important. But also you have to say it. I am actually doing my right of keeping silent, but you have to say it so they know that you're protecting your right. And this can be shared. This is a resource that we have on our website. So I'll share the website in a second. So ICE can only enter to your home if they have a search of arrest warrant. If you give them permission, and we talked already about the consent. That will be a consent. Open the door, it's a consent. Open your window from the car, it's a consent. So I just want to give you this information because those terms are very important. And if you know them, that could help us prevent the arrest. Okay, so I'm just want to share the last thing is there is magic words that were used to protect our rights. And these are examples of that. I want to speak with my lawyer. I want to remain silent. I do not consent to any search, and I want to see the warrant. Simple like that can prevent us for a bad situation. So I'm gonna pass that to the rapid response, and then we finish. Sorry. So right now we're encourage everyone to see if you can report any rates, if you can report any action of the immigrant and customs agents, please report it to this number. It's a hotline. So if we can prevent from for using or for protecting the rights of others, this will be another opportunity to do it. So please keep this in your funds and share it with your community. Also get involved in what are we doing. It's very important to keep us updated, and always things are changing. So if you can get involved, will be very important. This is all the regional organizers that are working around our state. So if you feel free to contact them, they will be happy to support and give more trainings, more presentations in your communities. Also, in our website, we have a lot of resources specifically for Know Your Rights. And there is an app called Know Your Rights in very, very different languages that we are sharing as a resource. You can have it in your phone. It's very handy. So I wanted to just encourage everyone to have it. Well, I just can say that I am very pleased and happy to be here. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me.
Thank you. Thank you, Beatriz. We do have some questions in the chat that we're going to hold until after our next speaker. And that next speaker is Sophia Mayott-Guerrero. Sophia is the Director of Advocacy for the ACLU of Colorado. Raised in the San Luis Valley, Sophia's parents have legacies in the hippie, anti-war, Chicano, and civil rights movements, instilling in her the principles and learnings from these political foundations. With 12 years of political and strategy experience, she has built impactful policy and campaign portfolios focused on justice-related issues. Currently, Sophia serves as the Director of Advocacy and Strategic Alliances for the ACLU of Colorado, where she leverages her deep expertise in organizing, policy, and campaigns. Her career began in arts and education as the arts director for the Boys and Girls Club of the San Luis Valley, and she later drew on her knowledge of rural communities to craft a justice-oriented policy portfolio on the government affairs team for Conservation Colorado. In addition to her policy work, she has substantial expertise in fundraising, strengthening support for causes she is passionate about. Sophia continues to carry a love for art and a strong sense of justice in both her professional and personal life. Sophia, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. You know, I've never heard that bio read aloud. I've only ever seen it written. That was such a nice experience. Well, hello to the League of Women Voters. I am going to be talking a little bit more about the current state of immigration related issues. We're going to talk a little bit more broadly about the EOs as well, and I will do my best to try to sort of burn through them so we have time for questions. And we will also be talking about how you can continue to do the good work that you're doing, but to be impactful in these particular areas. I'm going to share my screen. All right, so you all see my PowerPoint? Yes, it's working. Okay, great. So as Beth already said, I am Sophia Mayott-Guerrero, she, her, ella pronouns. It is very nice to be here and to meet you all on this snowy day. It's absolutely gorgeous out. This is my favorite weather. And we will go through this today. As we go, if you drop questions in the chat, I will try to then get to them by the end of my presentation. But again, I'm going to try to make sure that we're getting you through your thick agenda. I want to start also by saying thank you all to being here and spending your Saturdays like this. The League of Women Voters has done good work for a really long time, and you all are therefore the people who are the most involved. You are already above and beyond. This means you are already experts in activism in your own communities, in the reasons that you have been showing up and are showing up in this space. And that's really important expertise. So don't lose that as we continue this conversation today. So first, we're going to talk about executive orders. And these questions seem really simple, especially for folks, again, who follow the news, who are paying attention, but they're really important because particularly in this time when we are having an onslaught of scary changes and every possible area of the government, of our civil rights, of our freedoms, of protections for people that we care about personally, of protections for groups that deserve human dignity, that gets us all focused on trying to pick apart these details. And while, yes, there are people who should be doing that, our attorneys here and our attorneys nationally at the ACLU are doing that, right? They are diving into each one of these executive orders and they are finding the clauses. They're going to be able to try to overturn them or delay them or prevent even parts of the most harmful parts from being implemented. But for us who are trying to figure out how to engage and how to work as a movement, as a community, and as a collective, that energy, like just trying to become experts at these really small details is taking away our ability to actually just organize together and figure out our actions and figure out our asks for our electeds that will listen to us. So the first thing is just, what is an executive order? I've heard some people describe this particular list of executive orders as a wish list, but I will say that it is definitely more than that. The executive orders were historically used for implementing powers that the president had enumerated in the Constitution. So the list of things that says he is allowed, that he and his office have this purview. That is not what those 200 executive orders this week are. It is a bit more of a wish list. Some of them are things that are going and to be implemented right away. That does not mean that they would never be overturned. Many of them have been stayed in court, and already birthright citizenship in particular, which we will talk about in more detail, has been stayed in court. So there is legal action happening. There are some of them that are just actually not really implementable, like the regulatory agencies that they are trying to make do things just can't operate that way. And then there's also, of course, constitutionality and legality issues to be questioned. And then really, what are they used for? In the past, they have been used to be able to make quick or difficult decisions that are enumerated by the president, particularly in times of emergency, but also for items that are symbolically important. So things like national monuments and their names. We know, right, that Denali has now officially been renamed with an EO to Mount McKinley, and that is an example. Most presidents have used that power the other direction, where they're renaming important like natural occurrences and monuments to honor the local indigenous tribes and knowledge. But this is obviously the other direction, but that is something he's allowed to do. But these executive orders are not really just being used for that. They're being used to test the power that the administration has. They're not really being used to do any of the things. I mean, there are real implications to all of those things, but what the administration, what Trump is using these for, is to test and find out in the courts and to find out within Congress, which of these powers are going to still get checked. Where in the check and balances of the three branches that we have in government, which ones are still working? Which courts are still slowing me down? Who are my enemies out that are NGOs and advocacy groups? Where is it that I cross a line with even, my more staunch supporters? Where is it that my supporters don't mind? Where is it that nobody minds? I think one example that we're not going to talk about a lot is within the getting rid of DEI programs in national, all of the national regulatory agencies. And then they sent this letter that I'm sure lots of people have heard about that asks people to tell on their colleagues if their titles have been changed recently, because they think that might mean that they are covertly acting on DEI initiatives. And some DEI initiatives are about global inequities and the passive redlining and all of these things. And some of them are more social programs, internal. But whatever they are, we know that they can be very important and impactful, and they're necessary given that we just don't have equity, right, in our nation yet. But it feels a little bit silly compared to birthright citizenship, right? It's people aren't as stressed out about that. And so they're testing to see, will you rat on other people for this? How far do we have to get you in order to have you turn on each other? And so that's really what this is being used for, is testing the power and creating a ladder of terrible to bring us all up slowly, being boiled slowly, right? And so our job is, again, to not panic and to not get on that escalator where we start thinking things are okay. Doesn't mean you have to engage in everything all the time, but you don't want to start thinking things okay. Last thing is, what do these EOs tell us? What can we divine in terms of the future? And we're going to get into this, but what is the map, the roadmap that it's laying out of all of the things that fail through the courts right now or get rescinded? we can expect that they're going to come at those a different way. And so we can use these executive orders to think about what we're going to see in Congress over the next year or two, and even what we are going to see have the administration pressure states like Colorado that are holding the line and creating this like firewall for freedom against Project 2025. We're going to get pressured to get on board. And these EOs, these first EOs, are telling us what those things might be about. We had 15 total immigration-related EOs. On the LGBTQ front, one of the things that we are most worried about is recognizing only two sexes. I will just say, I know I'm mostly focusing on immigration, that the national government is already not issuing passports with the X marker, which is non-binary, but also have stopped processing name gender changes, which is a real issue. In Colorado, you can still get a driver's license for a state ID that has your proper gender that you actually are. But for people, it's going to be complicated about then if you say travel to another state, thinking about TSA, which is a national idea. And we also are part of the Real ID system, which is a nationally recognized ID system. So while we will be able to continue in Colorado to recognize people's genders as they are, it is very likely that people will be forced to go back to the binary and to be identifying in that way. And we're already seeing the implications. But again, it is being fought in court. And then the last one of repealing past executive orders of all of Biden's executive orders has a huge amount of impact, particularly on the climate, in addition to LGBTQ rights within the military and some levels of adoption and marrying. So what's happening? Birthright citizenship in particular, but on many of those EOs, the ACLU National is already responding with lawsuits. They're also doing an incredible job on affiliate coordination, and they're also trying to disseminate information. And I want to give a shout out to Attorney General Phil Weiser for joining the fight and joining the, I think it was 22 states that are suing on birthright citizenship. So we're not going to go fully into these executive orders, and we can talk more about them, but in order to really think about what does this mean in Colorado, and I think that that's the point of having our state-based focus, right? There are also national calls that I know you all have access to that the ACLU puts on for volunteers, and the information also exists on ACLU National and ACLU of Colorado's websites. It also exists within the news, and you're being inundated with it, right? We are particularly concerned about birthright citizenship and the protected spaces orders. And what we're really interested in Colorado is to see about protected spaces as one example is what is happening in the state. We still have our state level protections. And on all of these issues, immigration included, one of the main strategies that the ACLU of Colorado has actually been doing legally, like within our litigative program for several years, the last 3 or 4 at the least, is intentionally preparing for national attacks on our civil rights in Colorado. And so we have been testing civil rights, such as the local ICE coordination with local sheriff and police officers. We have been testing items like police accountability, local transparency, and LGBTQ rights issues, freedom of speech rights issues via the Colorado State Constitution. So we have even gone so far as some Supreme Court decisions still filing a lawsuit on a similar issue, on a similar precedent here in Colorado, and saying the national take on this actually doesn't really matter because we have a specific protection in Colorado, and that's what we're testing in the courts today, not national protections. We're testing Colorado, and we've been pretty successful at it. And we have also been partnering with groups like CERC to help to support the closing of loopholes at the state level. Immigration is largely federal, and so there's not as much as we can do in immigration as we can in other places. But some of the items around ICE coordination, around the way that ICE has access to state and local resources, about the way that we intend to continue to assume that people can be protected within protected spaces. I said protected too much, but we're talking hospitals, schools, churches, courthouses. Colorado has a special protection. We are one of very few states that says that ICE can't arrest you while you're a part of a trial or detain you. Sorry, the word is not arrest. They can't come to detain you while you're at a trial. They're not allowed to use your court date as a way to get you. Does that mean that they have occasionally worked just outside of that property? Yeah, absolutely. They are diligent and sneaky and nefarious, but we do have those types of protections, and we intend to investigate when we're getting reports of those things being overstepped, and to genuinely attempt to hold that line and say, this is not the Colorado law. And when you're in Colorado and on Colorado soil, you still have to face that. It's also kind of a weird thing because states' rights versus federal rights is always this push and pull in this nation. And so it's a little bit funny for a constitutional organization to say, no, the Colorado Constitution, right? But again, this has been an intentional part of this scenario planning. That's like our internal, what we were up to, and now it's called the Firewall for Freedom. We literally have a spreadsheet of all of the topics that are in Project 2025 and like where we think we're at in Colorado. Can we close a loophole via either litigation or via policy and lobbying and trying to pass laws? And we have been doing that work now for years. And that's great news because we did close a lot of loopholes and we're going to test it. But at the very least, Colorado is well prepared to be a real pain in the national government's butt on this topic. And let's talk a little bit more about how you can help us be a pain in the butt. I think, Ray, Beatriz's presentation about knowing your rights and also understanding like you can be a part of that confirmers network. You can call that hotline and help report ICE raids. You can help arm people with the Know Your Rights materials. You can leave them places. And that's really important. That is first and foremost, right? We have to try to stop the bleeding as much as we can, and allowing people to understand how to navigate the system to the best of their ability, even though the cards are stacked against them, is going to be helpful. The next thing that we have to think about is this is just the beginning. And as heartbreaking and intense as it is, we actually can't save every person. And that's awful. But it's going to be like, do people remember, right, when we're trying to flatten the curve with COVID, we've got masks on, and they're like, if we successfully flatten the curve, then we will think that we overreacted. And that's kind of the similar thing here, where it is really hard to count the people who don't get taken by ICE. It is really hard to count the people who don't end up in any level of difficult legal circumstances due to their gender, right? It is difficult to count the people who are less impacted by a bad and overreaching national government. But what I can tell you is that when we look at that long term and the systems level changes and the systems level strategies, we are actually preventing harm for people. It is difficult to understand and to enumerate, but it is a real thing, and it is incredibly necessary that people like you help us engage, because you are also the people not only with the knowledge, but with types of political privilege in this scary time, depending on your identities, that can be leveraged to dig in some of these spaces that are going to be really scary for people who have a family with mixed immigration status, right? It's going to be harder for those folks to be doing the advocacy in these spaces because they don't want people to know where they are. So we have to figure out how we can show up. So first thing, understanding your local elected system, including your city council, your mayor, your county commissioners, your sheriff, and your district attorney. We're actually, with our volunteers, going to have a spreadsheet that they help us fill out. And so if folks are interested in helping us with this project, we're really into it. The ACLU of Colorado, we seem like we're in a lot of places, but my advocacy team, which is all of our policy, all of our lobbying, all of our campaigns, all of our community organizing, all of our analytical research that isn't legal. So anything basically that's not communications or like suing people, that's my department. There's 7 of us, and the state's really big. We want to be able to react locally, and we want to be able to support great people locally, especially to build up those champs so that they run for higher office, and to prevent those people who are terrible, because, you know, the Tea Party started at school boards. The Tea Party started at school boards, and I want to face different adversaries in 15 years from now, because I plan to still be doing this work. And like, I just want the actual individuals to not be who I'm yelling at in Douglas County right now, right? I just want them to be different people, and you can help us do that. So understanding, like, right, like make a list of these people and see where they are in immigration. Google it, try to figure it out, and then keep track of it. And if you have anyone who seems like they're particularly aligned with your values and is going to be a champion, call and email them and say, I see what you're doing and I see that it's awesome. How else can I support you? At that local level of government, like that is an amazing email to receive. You never get those emails when you're an elected official. They will very likely respond to you depending on where you live. Denver, it's a little bigger, can be a little harder to cut through, but even within the metro, even within Colorado Springs, that's true. The coordination of local resources with ICE is really important to ICE being successful. So things like allowing them to use jail space in the county jail is something that many counties will do, and some counties will not. It means essentially what happens if there's a big raid and they pull people out, they have to have somewhere to take those people, to process them, to figure out where they're physically going to take them in the nation, if they're taking them to GEO, which is in Aurora, or a GEO somewhere else, or if they're getting deported, or if they are actually like going to be free to go because they've made a horrifying mistake and detained a bunch of people who hadn't done anything wrong, right? It's going to be really difficult to figure out, but that they need that time, and they're going to try to move people quickly. So they're going to try to use as local things as possible. So county jails, which means if your sheriff or your district attorney are sympathetic to ICE, that makes ICE's life easier. They don't have to let them use the county jail. So you can legitimately reach out to those departments and say, are you planning to do this? I don't think you should. Having that political pressure on those elected positions is helpful in this time. Of course, there are places where you will do the research and you will see those people are immovable. And in that case, I recommend that you don't waste your breath. You should do this work on people who are either gettable, like swingable, movable, or you're unsure, or with people who are champions because they need to be bolstered so they don't crumble under the pressure. We need our champs to stay rock solid, and they're getting a ton of political pressure from well-organized people, from the same think tanks that did Project 2025 and made Trump's election happen. Those same folks are funding local organizing. So if you can help bolster those champions so that they don't just eventually say, I can't keep this up. I can't keep putting my neck out. That's really important. So again, don't focus on the worst of the worst. Leave them alone. They're not worth your breath. You only have so much breath. You only have so many hours in the day. Find your champs or find your swingy people at any of these levels, and then watch what's happening on the agenda. If you can attend meetings sometimes when there's something relevant, or occasionally send that email or a phone call that either says great job or like, hey, I don't think you should have behaved this way. That's going to be really important. The other thing is to get involved with your schools. So school boards, but also there's sometimes PTAs or volunteer nights or what have you, and ensuring that the students and the teachers know that there's safe adults in their area, in their neighborhood is really, really critical. And there is now some guidance about to help support teachers and administrators in knowing what to do if ICE does show up at a school. But again, with school boards, and with the school administrators, so your principals and your superintendents, those are folks that can choose to say I don't want to let ICE in if they don't have proper warrants. I don't know why they're here. They can help hold that line. But if they don't know that they can hold that line, or they don't feel safe to do so because they don't have the support of their community to hold that line, it's just going to be harder for them. So what we're really trying to do is make it as easy as possible for the folks who can stick their neck out on these things to do so. My side hustle, my second job, is actually that I'm a local elected. And I can tell you that when we've brought up items like sanctuary cities, even though I'm elected in one of the most progressive districts in my city, and I'm a Latina, and actually my co-counselor in the same district is also a Latina, and we ran being very clear about our platforms. When we started talking about sanctuary cities a few years ago, the amount of opposition that came out of the woodwork was really, really alarming. And that was even before Trump was in presidency. They had meetings and rallies in our neighborhood, even though none of them were from our district. And having even a few people reach out and go, I see that what you're doing is right. And the folks that are showing up to yell at you who aren't even from your city are not right. You are correct. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep putting one foot in front of the other. That's okay. That is why we were able to keep working on that. 100%. It took 5 people who really, really cared and thought that what I was doing was right to keep me bolstered against hundreds of people. I was getting emails from Texas. This is nonsense, right? So that's what I mean. That really matters. I know it can feel like you're screaming into a void, but you're really, really not. And then lastly, distribute good information. And that goes on immigration, like the Know Your Rights information that Beatriz just shared, and the CERC Know Your Rights materials, and the hotline for people to be able to report ICE raids. But it also means helping people parse through the intensity of the media cycle, and also to not get carried away in rumors. Like, there's going to be a lot of rumors, and it feels like it's the right thing to say, like, well, if that is happening, it's really dangerous for people. Like, maybe it is dangerous for you to be out and queer in the city, or maybe it is dangerous. But the thing is like, those rumors are actually typically being spread on purpose by our opposition, because those rumors get us scared and frantic, and we can't think, and it divides us into all of our little corners to hunker down in, and it prevents us from being able to do this kind of work where we're a collective. And so not spreading rumors when you're hearing wild things, or saying like, hey, have you double checked that? And then finding your trusted resources. ACLU is a really, really good one on interpreting national news. CERC locally for immigration issues is like, there's other trusted folks, but they are like the trusted organization on this, truly, in the community. They are correct. And so help your communities. You are the most involved people in your communities. Help your communities decipher and like stay a little bit less getting defensive and in their corners. Help people see through it, help people interpret, and help people take these kinds of actions with you. That was a lot of information. Last thing, gotta have a call to action. I come from community organizing, must have a call to action. Our next volunteer call, we have volunteer calls every other week. Typically I am not on them, but I am sometimes. I was this week. It's typically our organizers, Julian and Leslie, who do a great job. We talk about the things that are moving at the legislature and actions that you can take there to, again, defend against terrible things and the erosions of our rights and champion promoting our rights in Colorado. We talk about EOs and national things. We talk about immigration. We talk about a lot of stuff. We also build skills on like how to be involved in activism. And then we're having a big civil rights lobby day. We have lots of community partners. CERC is one of them. On February 25th, this is the website. But if you go to the ACLU-CO.org, you can find an events page. And I think it's actually even on the landing page. So just www.aclu-co.org. And I will drop the link in the chat for folks. You will be able to find the events there. Just make sure if you're on the national ACLU site, it's just aclu.org. You will not find the Colorado events. You have to come to the Colorado one. You all are great, and thank you for your time.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Sophia. Both of you have been really informative. I'd like to open it up for questions now. Kathy.
My husband and I went to a town hall for our local senator for this area, and they did a wonderful presentation from CERC here in Loveland this week. And one of the things that I learned that I hadn't heard in a couple of other CERC trainings is that now there is the Facebook page for CERC, and I don't know if it was for CERC or for the response center that you have going there, but that the Facebook page was where they were putting the updates on raids, and also whether when somebody calls the response hotline, whether it's a rumor or it's something that's actually happening. So is that where we should sign up on Facebook so we get those updates?
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. I think you're referring to CORN, which is Colorado
Yes.
Rapid Response Network. Yes, it's the only way that you will have confirming. It has been a week of misinformation that it has been creating such a big chaos in our community. I wanted to say also there is truth on that. It was ICE activity in Grand Junction that I confirmed, and one people was detained going to the court. So that was another thing that to consider, that was an illegal detention. So it is happening, it's true, but also like I wanted to give a heads up that if you have confirmed information that it's from someone at firsthand, it's important to call the line and also report. If you are not there, but you hear from someone, ask those questions for more details, and also tell that person to call the line. We don't want to spread misinformation. We want to prevent chaos. So yes, Facebook page is the only way right now. You don't need to be or have an account for Facebook page to actually see the updates. So if you find a corn Facebook page, they will guide you to the Facebook page, which is public. My computer is frozen, so I cannot send the direct link right now, but I'll try to send it, or if someone else find it, please put it in the chat so people can know.
Thank you.
Ina asks, can you suggest language that we can use to inquire with our local sheriff whether or not they hold ICE detainees? Or is there another way to track this info?
Go ahead, Sophia. I think this is probably more your expertise.
Yes, so it really depends on your sheriff's office. I would say, so like Jefferson County, for example, a couple of months ago actually had a bit of a scandal for holding somebody for longer than they legally should have to keep them for ICE, which is actually not allowed in Colorado, like the way that they did it. And so there is an ACLU of Colorado letter. I'm sure I can find it for you. That went out to sheriffs in December, and to all the sheriffs, reminding them essentially of the ways that they are and are not allowed to coordinate with ICE. And there's also a fair amount of things either in Colorado law or in federal systems that allow for folks to decide, for sheriffs and DAs to decide how they want to interact with ICE. So depending on where you are, Googling you might be able to find is what I mean. You might be able to find out. You'll be able to find out quite a lot. Even little places like Teller County, which the biggest town is Cripple Creek, I think, in Teller County. So there's like a lot of news about them because of their coordination with ICE. So you can often find things with a quick Google search. And then the other thing that I would recommend doing before you just reach out to the sheriff is to also find out like if they are generally publicly friendly. Sheriffs are elected, so, or at least most of them are. And so typically they like have public meetings occasionally, or they like show up at a county meeting. And so I would actually recommend that you wait for that kind of opportunity in order to have an interaction with them, because I think it is unlikely, depending on the sheriff, that you get a response. Not that it's necessarily bad. And what I would genuinely ask, but again, I'm not sure that I would start with the sheriff. I would start with your county commissioners, to be honest. And I would just ask, do you know the level of coordination or resource support that our county plans to give to ICE when they are present here? Even Pueblo County, which has had a bunch of raids this week, the sheriff said, while if there is an actual criminal record, we could be helpful to ICE. We will not be supporting any ICE raids with any of our resources. And that Pueblo County is not, we didn't expect that. We expected something like much worse. So it's not amazing, but for a sheriff in a place where there's a lot of raids and where actually like they get in other types of trouble semi-regularly through that court system, even they were like, no, we don't think that they can use our jail. We don't think that they can use our computers. We don't think that they can, that we're going to help facilitate a mass raid. We might help facilitate an individual investigation. So start with Googling, and then I would start with your county commissioners before your sheriff to try to suss out where your county is at.
I'm actually here in the San Luis Valley. And so I'm looking at a lot of different counties, but that's helpful. I'll just do a little more research first. Thank you.
Yeah. Also, if you wanna reach out, like I said in my bio, I grew up in the SLV. My mom is also working right now to power map the San Luis
Oh,
Valley. You guys can maybe
okay.
like divide up some things. I'll drop my email in the chat.
For sure.
I would love
For
to just
sure.
connect you two, and I think SLV to SLV, you guys could like split it up a little, which might make your lives easier.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
That's
Thank you,
awesome.
Sophia.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Evie.
I read that Governor Polis is encouraging the Trump administration to take criminals out of our jails. Do you know more about that?
So in his State of the State address a couple of weeks ago, was that a couple of weeks ago?
Mm-hmm.
This is the end of the third week of January. It's been 18 years. In the State of the State address, he said, essentially has said that. There's like a clip, and I encourage you to actually find the real clip and not just like what I'm saying. I am trusting that the activists in this room like are good at finding information, because you all do that and you're involved. But the clip essentially said something like, we don't want to separate families, but we do think we would take the support to get criminals out of our state. It was something of that nature. We have not heard, and I will say, like, we do talk to that office with relative regularity, and so we have not heard about any specific coordination so far, or any like efforts to proactively invite that. So I don't know I don't know for sure, of course, because like, why would he tell us of all people, right? But I don't know that there's actually any confirmation of like proactive coordination. And more, I think that State of the State address really shook people, and reasonably so.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you so much to both Beatriz and Sophia for presenting this really important and timely information. We greatly appreciate it, and it's what we've been looking for. So please consider the League of Women Voters of Colorado as a strong ally. And thank you for your time.
Do. Thank you so much for inviting us.
Thank you. Okay, and now we'll move back home and hear about LWVCO's priorities for the 2025 legislative session. I hope you know that LWVCO's Legislative Action Committee, a group of trained volunteer member lobbyists from across the state, are already hard at work tracking bills in 17 issue areas, studying them to see if they align with league values and positions, and advocating for or against them. The leaders of the Legislative Action Committee are here to tell us what they see coming. You've already had the pleasure of meeting Andrea Wilkins, our legislative liaison. Linda Hutchinson is one of the co-directors of Action and Advocacy. She's a native Coloradan, born in Leadville, raised in the Denver area, attended the University of Colorado, graduating with a BA in Japanese and in International Affairs. Her adult career has been as a patent translator. Linda lived in Eugene, Oregon for about 10 years and then moved back to Colorado. She joined the League in Oregon and continued when she moved to Loveland. She served for 5 years on the Colorado 8th Judicial District Nominating Commission. She has a particular interest in news access and literacy and transparency in government. Linda enjoys hiking, gardening, and attending art exhibits in her spare time. Linda's co-director is Maud Naroll. Maud earned a PhD in economics from MIT, taught economics mainly at Dartmouth, researched in India, served as Nevada's state demographer, and was chief planner in Nevada's state budget office. Active in leagues in Nevada, Oregon, and Colorado, she served on boards, organized election forums, and participated in all 3 leagues' legislative action group. She's lived in 11 states and a few countries, moving to Colorado several years ago to be near family. Welcome, Andrea, Linda, and Maud.
I think we decided everything except who's going first.
I was just about to ask that too. So I was thinking that maybe I'm last, but if that's wrong, just tell me.
I can weigh in and get everybody discouraged. For the fiscal year starting this summer, Colorado has a budget deficit of nearly $700 million. Do we have a revenue problem? Nope. We have a TABOR problem. TABOR, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, caps how much the state can spend and will require Colorado to refund over $800 million. Without TABOR, we would have no budget hole, and we'd have more than $100 million to fund new programs next year. But we do have TABOR and a nearly $700 million hole in the budget, which means any bill with a fiscal note that needs money to implement will likely run into the TABOR buzzsaw and die in an appropriations committee. How to patch next year's TABOR budget hole? Well, since Medicaid and K-12 education take up well over half the general fund, it's no surprise the governor's budget proposed cutting some Medicare provider rates and changing the school funding formula. We'll have to see how the legislature handles the budget hole. But the real problem is TABOR, which the League has opposed since before it passed decades ago. On to Linda.
Thank you, Maud. Okay, so first I want to give a plug our news literacy page. I put the link in the chat, and I just think everybody should feel like that's your page. Please use that page, share it far and wide. Mis and disinformation affects all of our issues, so please use that page. And as a segue from information into libraries, I want to tell you about a bill. Last year, Senator Cutter introduced a bill that was an anti-book banning bill, but it applied only to public libraries, and it was signed into law by the governor. This year, Senators Cutter and Michelson-Janae are sponsoring Senate Bill 25063, Library Resource Decision Standards for Public Schools. The bill states that a public school library has the responsibility to challenge censorship in order to fulfill its responsibility of providing information and enlightenment, and public school librarians are highly trained and educated to intentionally and thoughtfully select library resources for their specific public schools. The bill requires local school boards and the State Charter School Institute Board to establish written policies for the acquisition, retention, display, and use of library resources, for the use of a public library facility, and for the reconsideration or exclusion removal of library resources, and that those actions must comply with specified standards that are included in the bill. Those standards specify that resources cannot be excluded based on the identity or politics of anyone involved in the creation of the resource, and that a librarian, media specialist, contractor, or volunteer may not be dismissed or otherwise subjected to retaliation for refusing to reconsider a resource before the matter has been reviewed according to the specified standards. The bill also specifies that a request to reconsider a resource is an open record subject to the Colorado Open Records Act, so yay, transparency. And we haven't, I think the bill was just introduced and we haven't taken a stance on it, but we will according to our LAC procedure. And then I just want to mention that we're fully aware that everybody is really nervous about what's coming out of the federal government. We expect to see bills that will protect Colorado from things like you know, damage to the environment, compromise to our environment or immigration. And LAC will be there to follow those bills throughout the session. Thank you.
All right. Well, I will follow with just kind of a few thoughts on a couple of issues. You know, the LAC, I think, as most people know, you know, covers such a broad range of issues, and that's according to the broad range of issues that our positions as an organization cover. So there is a lot going on. We just recently, thanks to some quick work by Katina, got the LAC bill list up on the website. So if you're interested in seeing that what we are following so far and what stances we have taken, I would encourage you to go to the legislative action page on the LWVCO site. Please note that the bill lists populate in real time. So if there's one that you're interested in, you can continuously check back to get information on status to see where it is in the process. And it's also important to note that a lot of our bill lists aren't very populated yet. The LAC has actually only had one formal meeting since the legislature convened. So we are still in the process of sifting through bills and bringing them forth for a vote. We do expect a lot more to start appearing on those bill lists. Excuse me. But the other thing that's been happening a lot is the committee hearings that have been taking place within the General Assembly have been really focused on the smart hearing proceedings. So that's the report back period that a lot of programs and government agencies are required to come back with to basically give information to the General Assembly on how things are working. It's an attempt at ensuring accountability and promoting good governance. So instead of seeing a whole lot of bills go through the process in this early stage of the session, we are seeing a lot of focus on those smart hearings. But rest assured, the bills will be picking up steam as we go along. And to just kind of piggyback a little bit on what Linda had mentioned about you know, protections against federal action, I would say that's definitely very much on the minds of LAC, as well as you know, many other groups and voters and stakeholders in the community. So we do expect to see action there in the areas of immigration, environment, voting in elections. A lot of the priorities that we have for LAC this year, some of those were kind of split out earlier in the agenda today, Colorado Voting Rights Act being one of them. In the area of voting in elections, the vacancy committee efforts that our guest legislators spoke to earlier in our agenda. We've also seen some early activity and some action by our LAC in establishing positions around gun safety issues. We actually have been doing some email votes in between our meetings where we approved a support position on a bill dealing with semi-automatic firearms and rapid fire defense. We're in the process of reviewing an environmental related bill using AI to fight wildfires. Obviously a big issue that's in the news right now, given what's happening in California. We anticipate a lot of activity in housing again this year, given the concerns about housing insecurity and the housing affordability crisis in Colorado. Again, we expect a lot of activity within the housing realm, and our team is always very busy around that. Our healthcare team within LAC is looking at Senate Bill 45 and a couple of other bills. Some of you may recall that one of the bills that we were pretty vocal in supporting last year was a bill that was intended to require a study by the Colorado School of Public Health to assess the feasibility and other considerations around implementing a universal healthcare payment system. That bill is back this year, Senate Bill 45, and is making its way through the committee process next week. It'll have its first hearing. And then the other area that I really want to mention is kind of just to give a shout out to our new Jedi team. we have got a really robust effort underway, and that's something that we're excited about because you know, Jedi bills can be hard to track because a lot of the legislation that we follow has got a Jedi component to it. So sometimes it's hard to kind of identify, and there's a lot of cross-jurisdictional issues, so it requires coordination with some of the other issue area teams. And, you know, sometimes the issue is just a little more buried, but we have got a great team that has come together to look at the kind of broad umbrella of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And that includes a whole bunch of things, but they have been extremely active. And that's something that I just wanted to make sure and tout. So everybody is aware, because we've been really kind of looking to build that capacity out within our work within LIC for a long time. And we've got a team that is, you know, has really just hit the ground running this session. So we're excited about that. Their bill list, as well as all the other areas we cover, are on the website. And then the last thing I want to draw your attention to are the task force pages. In addition to the legislative action page, we have got a wealth of information on our task force pages. And I think we are up to maybe 10 or 11 task forces now. So lots of great information. If you've got questions about any legislation as the session goes on, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, Maud, or Linda. And, you know, we can either answer your questions or put you in touch with the issue expert who can. And I think that's about all. I'll go ahead and hand it back to Beth.
Any questions? Agreed, Kathleen. Whew. Thank you. Okay, if there are no questions, it's time to turn you loose into a chilly weekend. But first, a big thank you to all of our speakers: Senator Lindsey Daugherty, Representative Bob Marshall, Governor Jared Polis, John Caldara of the Independence Institute, Marcia Johnson from LWVUS, Sophia Mayott-Guerrero from ACLU, Beatriz Garcia from CIRC, Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition, and our own Andrea Wilkins, Linda Hutchinson, and Maud Naroll. I'd also like to thank Jane Dunk and Katina Frierson for their help in getting this event going. I hope to see many of you at the Molly Brown House on February 20th as we celebrate the League's 105th birthday. And I thank each of you for your interest and commitment to American democracy. And I hope and know you will all remain involved and active. It's not a spectator sport, and I think we all know that involvement and action are needed now more than ever. Let's stand strong and stand together. Thank you. Enjoy your weekend.